The attack upon the Soul Sector leaves a lot of cleaning up to do. Starting way out where the first area was assaulted, the 4 production facilities will need to be rebuilt from scratch. Even though several did survive by going into the bunkers and just waiting for rescue, it's going to have to be redone completely. They're simply shredded. It seems like the lizards got a little uppity. Some might say, temper, temper there, lizard. But this time, when they make them, humanity knows they must make them bigger, stronger, and definitely meaner. So if this ever happens again, somebody's really going to take one right to the nose. The 3 space docks are a totally different manner. Since they weren't fully destroyed, they had to be looked at close. Station 1, known as Saratoga, will be the only space dock to stay as it is. As it received only light damage from any type of fire, it only got damaged by the explosion of Station 2. It can still function just fine. It just needed a little bit of work on simply one of the pylons, and that's all. Station 2, as stated before, was a complete and total loss. Yet the parts can be collected to be recycled. It's just not going to be there. Station 3 received very heavy damage and for a while was believed that would need to be simply fixed up. A few months of work, but then they looked close and realized it's going to be a whole lot easier to decommission this station and use some of its parts to build a new one. With the 3 space docks, they will also receive new designations. Though Station 1 will still remain the Saratoga. The second station to be built will be called the Waterloo, and the third will be Thermopylae. And this time they will not be close together, just in case this happens again. Calling the third station Thermopylae really annoyed those on Io, especially those of the capital city of Sparta. That was until they were told that that station will be designed and operated under the protection and the tutelage of Io itself. Even though the other 2 are going to be dealing with what's known at this point as standard ships, Thermopylae is going to be the one with Io designed ships. Though they're not going to be coming out as fast, they are going to be very, very dangerous. Many believed after all this, Io would actually join Earth and all the rest of her colonies and not be an independent state. But they decide to remain a very isolationist nation. They did vote to join the assault efforts, but that's only after seeing the lizards had attacked first. And according to their laws, if someone attacks you with intent to kill, well, there's only one outcome. 2 men enter, 1 man leaves. Or in this case, 2 creatures enter, and only the man walks away. Due to this mentality, everybody understood why the Io ships were so dangerous. Everyone saw the video of how well they operated and how they just totally tossed up the salad of those lizard ships. It was absolutely frightening to see how well they were designed, even though there's just so few of them. With this in mind, with the Thermopylae being constructed, everyone is very excited at the idea of being aboard a Spartan-designed ship, especially a battleship. But saying this, all those from Io could say, wait until they see the rest of the designs. Moving in closer towards Earth, you could see the 2 stations, the civilian stations known as Troy and Athens. It's of note that they were not taken out of the action at all. In fact, only one of them received any type of damage. They did realize their position as being a hub with everyone else. They also realized it's not a good idea to push their luck, as they realized that everybody still wanted blood and everybody was fresh from the fight, so they would have to make sure that they did not ask for too much. They only asked for medical support, because they did have some wounded, of course, and for task force protection until repairs and rearming is complete. Repairs wouldn't take long, but the amount of ordnance they flung out into space, well, that's going to take a while to restock. The stations, of course, are primarily responsible for rebuilding the 4 resource gathering stations that they lost, and they will have their hands full for a while. But once they do, and they rebuild these much larger procurement areas, it's back to business, and business is going to be really good. Another reason for the lack of narcissism, given the fact that the stations are in charge of all that material, is they have much bigger concerns. In fact, all of humanity has bigger concerns, and that would be Earth. Earth is currently being invaded. The strike of the mass driver balls onto the face of Earth, as well as those into the oceans, not only made one hell of a mess, but definitely made everything all wet with those balls to the face. Tsunamis ravage all the blue water coastlines anywhere around the world. Once again, these tsunamis reached across and started wiping islands completely off the map. Island nations, like many of those inside the Philippines, were wiped off by waves hundreds of feet high as they simply came across with so much pressure and so fast that the local population didn't even know what was happening until they were struck. The eastern coast of Africa was wiped out 200 miles inland thanks to these tsunamis. The Sphinx, surprisingly, was washed over again with some water. But this time, there was a little bit of reaction that made many people wonder, there might be something to this. This would also be the first time since the Younger Dryas era, or Noah, had showed up that the Sphinx would be tasting any type of water. Yet it wasn't just the Indian Ocean that was struck, by any stretch of the imagination. Hits in both the northern and southern Atlantic caused similar issues all across the coastlines of not only South America and Africa, but North America and Europe all at the same time. A direct hit in the center of the Pacific is also doing no better. Yet the bonus on that one compared to those that landed in the Atlantic. In the Atlantic, they were lucky if they had 40 minutes before the first wave struck onto the shore. The one that basically bullseyed the Pacific gave them 4 or 5 hours to reach inland or any high ground they could, and this would save lives, which is all anybody really gave a shit about at that point. The one strike on the land hit northwest Africa and created a massive dust and sandstorm as it simply barreled into its location. The shockwave that was felt was stronger than a supervolcano and was a complete wall of dirt in all directions as it simply swept across as its own tsunami began to rip entire villages out. Whatever was still there was gone. Any foliage was simply bent over sideways or torn out by its roots. If anybody was outside, it was like the world's largest sandblaster. Anyone hit, or anything hit, would simply have the outer layer of their skin ripped clean off, followed very shortly by the muscles, tendons, and the bones torn out. They would be stripped to pieces in a matter of seconds. The only bonus is it would happen so fast that they wouldn't be able to register the pain before their bodies were simply torn to tiny little chunks. Given the location, only a few personnel were struck by this, and everyone else held their breath as they didn't know what else was going to happen, and then they looked closely, and they took a small sigh of relief. Even though the spray of sand and dirt was still going out, it was lowering and losing speed eventually. They took a breath because they said, "Whew, thankfully, no volcanoes are close." And of course, no fault lines either. That could have been bad. That could have been very bad. The sudden impact and shockwave was still enough to cause underwater volcanoes to become active in the western and northwestern areas. This would create a dead zone in the oceans for years, as Lord knows how much sulfur, dioxin, and everything else was shooting up from underneath the seabed. Even Cape Verde shook hard enough that half of it finally broke off and slid into the ocean, compounding the issues as it was going to send another tsunami across the Atlantic and would end up splashing across Bermuda, Cuba, and everything else. Though the strike was not on a fault line, the impact does trigger quakes all over the planet, usually small quakes. But this was still something to be careful of, as you don't know if there's going to be some sort of secondary quake. Something might give, something might pop, and then they're really in trouble. Mars had to deal with the same thing. Thankfully for them, the majority of population is still subterranean. Aside from a few small cities, the population will be fine. They just have to wait until everything settles. Also, there is the fact there are no Martian fault lines to actually strike. The hardest part for them now, like stated before, is waiting for the dust to settle so they can finally rebuild. Back on Earth, it isn't just the effects on the planets they have to face, as 8.1 million of these lizards are making landfall under the cover of all this insanity. Everyone is so desperate for survival that they don't seem to care about the dropships coming down and bringing all sorts of trouble along with them. The 8 lizard carriers had actually dropped down everybody onto the planet before they were taken down. Yet even though they were taken down, all the crew reached for the escape pods, and they were heading towards Earth as well. Not all will reach the surface in one piece, though. Instead, they will fall to Earth in pieces. Even with all the trouble that's down on the planet, from the surface, ground-based anti-ship cannons fire into the swarm. These were primarily aimed at the carriers, yet as they fly through the swarm, the shockwave that comes from them as they simply pass by each of the pods or by each of these shuttles will simply shake them so hard that most of the plating will rip clean off if they get a direct strike, or even so close as 10 to 50 meters. There's going to be some sort of damage once these shuttles enter the atmosphere. The missiles attack will come next, and they come in a massive group, filling the air with angry, AI-driven death, with flaming butts pushing them all the way up. These glow bugs, as they're like to be called, will make sure that they strike their target, leaving all those coming down a flaming mess. If the enemy ends up getting close to any built-up areas, they will end up with another shock, as automated anti-air artillery, also known as AAA, begins to raise up high and burn through ammo at an excessively fast pace, spraying this way and that way, making sure they fire into the groups, putting all sorts of different holes into anything they can, trying to knock it out of the sky. If not, they're going to maim as much as they can. They would use the PPCs, but PPCs don't work well inside an atmosphere. Not anywhere near the ability they do as they fly through the void of space. Yet, these are in fact used, as when they strike, they do cause a little bit of thermal issue, but they will also throw the device that they hit off target as all the sensors begin to fry. Get enough of them, and they're going down hard. As the shuttles reach the ground, all the lizards disembark as fast they can, as artillery rounds are immediately aimed in their direction. Sometimes guided munitions, glide bombs, will come in and strike the sides of these vessels. They don't want to be close, as many of these corvettes and frigates that are on the ground are very juicy targets. As soon as they're offloaded, though, they take back to the air and use their point defenses to protect themselves. Once the frigates and the corvettes take off and begin to fight off any air support that's coming in, the lizards on the ground push forward with everything they have, thinking they're going to take this planet, and they chuckle, they laugh, they hiss, and they cry, as they believe it's going to be easy to take down the humans. Yet, it seems that all the humans still on the surface attack, charging directly into the enemy formations, not caring that they're hurt or killed as long as they jump on and kill one of these reptiles. With the planet dealing with so much, communications are spotty at best for both sides. Facing the humans on the ground, Many of the lizards immediately begin to call for support, anything, calling up to their battleships to fire down with close range support, anything to break the humans' lines. But as they call up, they immediately hear nothing. Nothing is coming back. They don't know what's going on in space. All they know is they need to push to their objectives. And that's what they do. They continue to push forward unabated, making sure they blast anything that does not have scales. Human projectile weapons, though, prove devastating as they keep moving up. Even a single hit is something they are not expecting to feel so painful. It seems like behind every blade of flora there's a bayonet, a rifle barrel, an energy weapon, a light vehicle, an armored vehicle, or just more angry humans that will take them on with bare hands. This makes the lizards on the ground very paranoid as they slowly try to push forward. Many wondering why they don't just blow this planet up if these humans are actually this dangerous. Then again, the realization of we didn't know they were this dangerous comes to play. In desperation, they continue and they are making progress. The lizards believe that if they can take certain locations and certain personnel, they can force the humans to surrender. Isn't that the way all species work? Then, once they have knowledge and weapons and ships of humanity to make themselves stronger and better, they will simply wipe them out, like somebody wiping a case of the schnitz off their nose. Looking to the skies, they can see gunships, corvettes, and even frigates inside the atmosphere fighting off the planetary craft that seem to come in from every direction. VTOLs and fast craft move from every direction. The point defense systems are having so much trouble dealing with the guided munitions that are sometimes so difficult to avoid as they seem to turn at 90-degree angles just in a moment. They're not used to fighting in an atmosphere, and that also makes it difficult. Then their hope glitters as new contacts are seen in the skies. Thousands of contacts fill the air from far away, getting closer and closer. The lizards on the ground believe that the reinforcements are coming, and they're rejuvenated at the assault as they begin to push farther, faster, harder as much as they can. That's until one of the lizards uses his monocle to look up, and that's when his tail drops to the ground with a thud. Everyone around him is surprised as they know this motion. It's the motion of somebody who just gave up. What actually worried them is not only did his tail hit the ground, but several of his scales hit the ground too, out of sheer fear, as it seemed as though his greenish scales turned completely white. His commanders screamed out, "What is it? What is it? What is wrong?" All he came back with, "Those are not ours." Across the planet, drop pods rain from every ship capable of dropping. Behind them are corvettes and frigates that seemingly try to race the pods to the surface. As they get closer and closer, missiles and ballistics are fired from these incoming vessels and fired directly at the lizards that are still in the air. As they duck and dive and try to use their point defense systems, the point defense systems run hot, begin to run out of their energy or munitions, and now these reptiles that don't have wings are beginning to fall like stones on fire. The pods strike the ground and immediately deploy. Heavily armored soldiers step out and begin to do what they do best: hunt. Frigates begin to land all over the place and deploy as many ground vehicles as they have in their cargo hold. Lizards begin to panic as they take fire from both sides. The humans that were on the planet when they attacked are so close right now that they are right in the lizard's face, quite literally jumping up with something so small as a 45, a knife, or a broken bottle. It didn't matter. They came at the lizards with whatever they could, anything to kill them. The ones that just landed were now behind them, shooting them in the back. The lizards realized real quick that they were about to be skewered from the front and the rear. No matter which way they go, the humans are going to penetrate them. As the lizards get completely surrounded, they begin to lash out every which way, and they begin to fight for their final moments, trying any way to stay alive. They scream and curse their elders for abandoning them at their time of need. As their weapons fail, they reach out, try to bite and claw at anything they can. The desperation is palpable, but that is just that, desperation. In the end, the last lizard to be alive was lanced through the chest and dies a few moments after an unarmored human raised the body up over his head. The lizard's blood sliding down the barrel as its body weight forces the bayonets not only into its torso, but all the way through the back. The militiaman is seen raising the body high in one hand and raising his fist in the other, screaming up in the sky. The thunderous roar echoes through the area and seems to pierce the void as the battle for Earth has ended. Even though the victory has been achieved and humans have actually saved their Mother Earth once again, just as every battle before, they need time. Time for Earth to settle again from all the damage that's being done. The water, of course, receded, but the dust stayed up in the atmosphere for a long time. The small volcanoes that popped set up their own clouds as well. Thankfully, it's not too bad and will receive, but they need time. They need time for all the floodwaters to back out of the high areas so they can rebuild. They need time for the living and dead to be counted. They need time to treat all the injuries. They need time for houses and infrastructure to be rebuilt. And they need time for those of Earth and Mars to show how well they can survive. Thankfully, they have several to help. Not only the fleet, not only Io, not only the stations, but Venus as well, who got away unscathed because they pulled the forces back before engaging Venus. Unfortunately, after everything settled, the maps had to be redrawn again, and while they were doing so, they sent word to the Allies and let them know that the lizards can be beaten. Several were wondering if this was actually possible, that they could actually not just push them away, but actually beat them. That is, until humanity showed all the videos of the battle. All the allies that saw this believed that the human fleet would immediately set sail for the lizard's home system. This was wrong. At this moment in history, lizards control a vast territory, several sectors wide. The attack on Earth also shows something that the lizards are not to be trifled with. Far from it. And because there's something that needs to be taken seriously, they're going to need intel while they fix everything. To that end, not only did they use all the stealth vessels they already have, but they had to build a few extras. Now these would mainly be corvettes, but a few frigates as well. And they would be sent out and begin checking on every sector. But their job was not to fight, but simply to get intel. And what they find when they leave friendly sectors is not encouraging. As it turns out, while humanity was out trying to save all those they knew about, the lizards had also been extremely busy trying to exterminate species one after another. One of the first ones to be checked on was the Greys, and it turns out they had shown the lizards what for, and that's for sure. Even though their entire home system was dead, around every planet and stretching all through their sector is the remains of a massive space battle. It was incredible to see debris stretching all the way from the star to the last planet, including, at what they could tell, at least 4 invasion carriers and more than a dozen battleships. The rest of the debris was inconceivable, and it was amazing how they could be destroyed at that level. Yet there was many of the gray ships mixed in. It is a solemn day as they begin to check the planets one after another, trying to see if anyone survived. And when they didn't, the entire group simply flew by the home planet, and in a silent show of respect to those that went down swinging, they all stood at attention and presented arms in a salute and held it for the 3 hours as they passed by the planet. The insectoids, known as the Grantchek, didn't fare so well either. It looked like all the queens had been killed by the plague a long time ago. Rotting bodies were everywhere on their planets. The flora of the home planet was actually taking everything back, even though most of the insectoids tend to strip the entire planet when they get there. More than one man unfortunately lost his lunch as one of the queens was being inspected. Turns out the slightest touch made her body break apart, spilling rotten guts and half-formed eggs all over the place. Not even the suit's biofilters could stop the smell, and many of those in the room simply threw up inside their helmets. It should be noted that these suits are supposed to avoid all waste, yet because it couldn't handle that much vomit, many of them had to pull their helmets off before they drowned, which made things so much worse. It was actually so bad that many of the pilots refused to pick up any of these until they simply stripped off the suits, as the stench made even the hardest veteran pilot retch right onto their controls, and this definitely didn't make the smell any better. Needless to say, they moved on from those sectors very quickly. Finding the avian species known as the Wash was interesting, as they had not been touched at all since their moons had been taken and the plague came out. Yet, without support from any other civilization, their own civilization had slid back into primitive survival at best. The main factor wasn't actually the plague nor the storms. As it turns out, without enough females, the males would start killing each other during the mating season, and it was very violent. It should be noted that the plague cut the population by 50%, yet after even their first mating season, the population was down to 9% pre-plague. With all this, they lost most of their best minds, their engineers, pilots, hell, even ranchers. Those tend to be the strongest, yet they were completely outnumbered and torn apart during the rut. They have spent the last 300 years just getting by. A ground team actually met them and offered help. The Wash males immediately got very aggressive, trying to protect the females, but the females now have control over the civilization, though they always did have control over the civilization. A call to the human fleet command brought an entire task force to help, yet even with their support, it's going to be another century at least before these avians even get back on their feet, or talons, so to speak. It would eventually turn into a search of dead zone after dead zone, and with each lost civilization, with each lost species, humanity's contempt for those that caused this grows. There's nothing hidden from the population either, not any longer. All video and images are shown to anyone who decides they want to see, yet most who only watch for a little while already have their blood boiling through their skin, and they just don't want some blood. They just don't want a piece. They want all the pieces, and this drives them to work even harder. Hope of finding any other species still kicking is failing fast, however. Only one more species remains to be checked on, and no one's really holding out hope. It's a distant species that is very skittish to others. Also, very aggressive if cornered or simply provoked the wrong way. Humanity calls them deers, as the slang deer people doesn't really roll off the tongue right. The reason for the name, of course, is the fact that the legs of them, even though they're bipedal, are actually shaped like actual deer, even down to the hooves. And hell, they even have a tail that's all fluffy but really short that flickers depending on the mood of the actual deers. And of course, the males do have antlers, females not so much. Though everything else is very human-like, and humanity as a whole has not actually interacted with them, except for a couple of messages. They've never actually met in person. As they go into the sector, they call out, but with no response or anything on sensors. The recon group moves in, constantly sending out a transmission, asking for permission to land, but they get nothing. With this, the hope of seeing anyone is sinking very, very fast. A landing would have to take place to confirm things, just like always, but no one wants to go into another dead world as they've had their fill. As they begin to come through the atmosphere, everyone was surprised by something. The spaceport is surprisingly clear as they descend down towards the planet. They expected to try and fight through the foliage or have to send down some sort of accelerant on fire just to clear it out, but no, they should be able to land just fine. But about halfway down, their sensors all go absolutely nuts. Before they realize what's going on, aerial vehicles emerge from hidden bases and flooding the skies from every direction. Before anyone realizes, weapons from the ground are locked onto them. Not only that, but those in the air, yet they haven't fired. The commander, realizing what's going on, yells to the recon group, "Full stop!" And the ships just freeze in space. The human ships continue to broadcast peaceful intentions as the frigates and corvettes just sit in the skies. To many, you would think it's a giant metal boxy turd just sitting there, just waiting. With no response after a few days, the commander of the group opens up the dorsal hatch and steps out into the open, standing on top of his ship so that everyone can see. He's fighting the biting wind, hoping it doesn't knock him over as he stands there at 9,000 feet. And he just stood, perfectly still, looking around just a little bit with his eyes, but simply standing there. Several of the small craft seem to get in and come close. The commander can see that the pilots are getting close, tilting their craft so that they could look at him very well. He was afraid to make any type of gesture, as he worried that any type of gesture might be taken the wrong way, so he simply froze there. The only exception is to move his head up or a little bit to the side to look at the pilots who were looking at him. A subordinate suddenly reached up, grabbed him by the foot so he would actually turn, and then waved, screaming at him, "Sir, come back in!" They finally received landing coordinates, but nothing else. The human ships lowered themselves very, very slowly as they didn't want to make any sudden moves. They knew they were severely outgunned, outmaneuvered, and they didn't know the potency of the weapons, so best not to push your luck. The ships landed at the spaceport without making a single sound. Even as the doors opened, there was nothing. Human engineering at its finest. And as they stepped out, they realized that they were completely surrounded. Those in the suits held their weapons just a little tighter, yet they were motioned, don't draw your weapons, don't do it. This order was given non-verbally, just a look, a quick gesture, or a raising of a hand. It seemed to calm everyone down as they suddenly realized that if they wanted to be attacked, then they wouldn't be even thinking about it much. The commander orders everyone to stay where they are, and he simply steps forward about 10 steps and stops. As he stands there and waits, a very large deer male walks forward. He says something to the commander, and The commander holds up his hand for a moment and then puts his hand to his ear. The commander waits for the translator, and after a bit of confusion, he hears in a translated voice, "Are you human? Never seen one before. Believed extinct." The commander, looking up, trying not to smile, and said, "Almost, but the rumors of our destruction have been a bit exaggerated. They talk about the loss of their moons, the subsequent plague killing off almost all of the males outside of the womb, then the attack of the reptilians. As it turns out, the reptiles had destroyed the little resistance that the deers had in space and immediately invaded, trying to kill everyone in order to take the planet. They left in frustration that the deers are so fast that they're hard to hit, excessively hard to hit, as they won't just stand there broadside and wait for somebody to blast them, but they're also very tough. Not only could the lizard's weapons barely even hurt them, but it took concentrated effort just to knock one of them down. Even the lizards, when they grabbed a hold with their claws, couldn't seem to break through their skin easy, but they could bite kind of hard. The best they could do was planetary bombardment, and the bombardment, when explained, seemed very, very sloppy, at least by human standards, that is. Because of this, the deers survived, and they've been trying to survive all this time, hiding away and slowly rebuilding out of sight. Hearing all this, which was a long, long explanation, the commander simply paused and said, "I have two questions. First, do you want some help rebuilding? Get you beyond survival. Allow you to start reaching for the stars again." He could see that the deer's male was standing up, happy at this, thinking about it. The commander continued, "Second, are you interested in getting any payback?" As the translator spit out these words, it was clear that the entire group of deers that was in earshot was very happy at this, as their tails flicked like crazy along with their ears, and they seemed to almost smile a toothless grin. For the next 169 human years, they would refit and rebuild others. The canines and felines of Membart have become a thriving colony, even stretching all the way across their homeworld and starting to reach out into the stars again. Their ships are limited, to say the least, but colonization of the sector is being prepared to go beyond their cradle world and once again take their place. The pretties are absolutely flourishing, building and spreading faster than anyone had expected, but mainly due to their biological ability to swap from female to male if they wanted. They didn't need any more human assistance. They still like having humans, though. Some a little too much. As it turns out, they're unable to reproduce with humans. It's fairly common for them to try and get a human out of their armor. Well, at least that's the phrase they use. Let's just say most of the humans that are there aren't exactly in armor, but then again, trying to undo a human's belt when they don't want you to is difficult at best. Those from Termek, also known as the Sugars, are building up very nicely. Humanity is working very closely with them to help them out, and it should be of no one's surprise that some of these green-eyed ladies have taken human soldiers as mates. It's a fairly low percentage, however, as it seems kind of a taboo subject, as the majority of the Sugars are afraid of species genetic degradation or dilution of some sort. The Dragonoids have also been rebuilding fairly quickly, though their reproduction is slow, to say the least, especially in human standards. Though once hearing this, it shouldn't be anyone's surprise that several of the human soldiers offered to help in this regard. However, they quickly discovered something. Like the pretties, they actually can't aid in that. Although this doesn't stop the Dragonoid's females from enjoying a human or 5 every once in a while, as they don't have a chance of actually conceiving. Though not actually a taboo subject like it is with the sugars, it's still not something that's mentioned, more like an open secret. The Wash are going to take a long, long time before they're able to join anybody in space. Not only is their planet pretty much broken down to almost nothing because of centuries of neglect, but their population is so small that it will take time, a long time, before they even have enough to even want to leave their spinning ball through this cosmos. That just leaves the deers. At first, extremely wary of humans, as that's their nature, they did accept the aid and started to enjoy human food a little bit much. They began the long process of living on the surface once again, which was a little bit of an issue to some of the small ones, as they weren't sure if they should go out. They'd been told their entire lives that danger is outside, so they should stay hidden. Yet once they got the kids outside, the only thing they wanted to do was run. And the deers are fast, very fast. Not particularly strong by human standards, but extremely quick. However, there's a bit of a catch-22 here. Since strength is how the males show dominance for the females, a lot of fights begin during the rut. A lot of fights. And these are breakdown, slobber knocker type fights. Realizing this, the commander of the expeditionary forces evacuated all humans from the planet, effective immediately, at least until the rut is over. Even those in charge of the deers were like, whew, okay, this is going to solve some problems. However, it didn't solve all of them. During this time, an incident aboard the SS Demon, an Erica-class cruiser, happened when a soldier from the War Sniper battle group had a young deers aboard the ship when the rut started. He figured that she'd be safe up in the ship with him, yet he forgot one simple thing. The males go into rut, but she was going to go into heat. This happened during the night shift watch, and the artificial intelligent virtual assistant, the AVA system, kept activating over and over again, asking if they needed some sort of assistance, not understanding that it was just because the console was being pushed against over and over and over again, faster and faster. During the throes of passion, they didn't seem to notice that the death blossom of the cruiser was being primed. The crew all awoke with a start as the telltale sound of the power conduit straining under the death blossom could be heard throughout the ship. Running into the bridge, the young deer female had just gotten exactly what she wanted from her earthly friend, and had now turned to the crew with a strange look in her eye, all of which seemed to stop what they were doing as they were rushing in. The commander looked forward, and all he heard was, "Sir, it's not what it looks like." By the time he finished that sentence, the female, totally out of her senses due to the heat, jumped at the first crew member and attempted to mate with him, tearing at the few outer garments he was wearing. Suddenly, right as she started to succeed, the one she had mated with before simply said, "Okay, sir, it is what it looks like." They were all so befuddled they didn't know what in the hell was going on, and did have to contain the female, yet even though not that strong normally, it seems like whatever muscle limiter she had in her brain was turned off for what was going on. They immediately rushed her to the planet and apologized profusely, dropping her off and hoping that they didn't just lose all possibilities of commerce or diplomacy with the deers. The male deers, after the rut, went to talk with the humans. And right when the tensions got very high, the deers started to chuckle. They thought the whole thing was funny. They simply looked at the young sailor who had done this in the first place, realizing that he was still standing, even though he kind of did walk with a limp. They said, "I'm surprised you're still alive. Imagine if you had to deal with two." The news of this spread and actually became a running joke as everybody brought back the old moniker, "Nothing runs like a deer." In spite of this incident allowing all species to get a good hearty laugh that they truly needed, everyone was still preparing to take out their generations of or centuries of anger on those that wanted to purge the known universe of life. With recon groups returning, they all wanted to hear the news, and the recon groups definitely brought news. It seems as though the lizards are also preparing, and when they were asked, are they preparing to attack? Where? When? The recon group just calmed down, asked everybody to relax, said they're not preparing to attack. They're preparing to defend. As it turned out, the lizards have basically bled themselves dry as victory over Greys, Pretties, and others severely depleted their armada. The only two carriers they found are severely undercrewed at this point. The lizards are not focusing on carriers, but instead they're building defense nets and ships. A lot of ships. So many ships that they truly outnumbered humanity at this point. And with supplemented by the defense net, it would turn into another Battle of Earth, yet in reverse. Not something anybody wanted to do. Sharing this information with the rest of the species, the human representatives could see all the other species talking amongst themselves. It was pretty much impossible for the translator to hear them all, as they were simply talking in their own languages. Eventually, they all kind of looked at each other, and a canine stood tall. He reached up, hit his button, and then spoke out, claiming that he needed to speak, and everyone gave him his time. "Unless I am unable to understand the intentions of others, I believe you humans call this reading room, I believe I speak for the council when I say they brought their death with the rain. It is time they feel the same as we bring our rain." Hello everybody, this is Syntax. Thank you so much for joining me on Chapter 8 of It's Raining... What? Before I leave, I need to send out a few special thank yous to some of my supporters, and those would be the Lakeem, MTF Guard, SS Demon, Erica Gem, Guardian Sage, Brian Kemp, Sir, Chris Dixon, and Cause Lynn. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel. Everybody else, I will see you on the next one. This is Syntax, ejecting.